If you're a fan of the Botes sisters, you probably know of the rule of the square. When I learned about it, it didn't exactly win me any games I would have lost if I didn't know this rule, but it definitely made my victory a lot less complicated and annoying. I like to think of these heuristics as chess life hacks, where they are simplifications of the game that allow you to calculate complicated positions more easily by making a very bothersome process, well, simpler. Here are 5 other chess hacks I found throughout my experience playing chess. Let's start with the simplest way to avoid forks. I will show you a position for a few seconds. It's a rook versus knight endgame, and you are playing black. The king will be in check, and you are quite low on time, so try to come up with a move instinctively to not get forked by the knight. Ready? Alright, don't get forked. If you played king f6 or king e6, good job. You managed to not get forked. If you played king g6 or king g4, you just lost a completely one position for black and will probably be tilted for your next 5 games. A very costly mistake. And if you played any of these moves, I don't know, may the spirit of Gary chess haunt your soul. When I started playing chess, I would often miss these knight forks in the endgame, and I really wish someone would have told me about knight move distances. Even though king e6 also avoids a fork, I personally would play king f6 100% of the time because squares directly adjacent to the knight require 2 moves to attack. Notice in this visual that these squares take the knight 3 moves to attack, the sweet spot for annoyance for the opposing player. I know I literally sigh out loud and sometimes just resign outright if my opponent is deliberately putting pieces on those squares to avoid forks. Another reason to intuitively pick king f6 is that it's on a different colored square than the rook. A knight can only fork pieces if they are on the same color, which makes it even more depressing for the white player. 2 passed pawns versus a king forces the king to stay within the square of the pawn in front. This is probably my favorite endgame pattern because of how fun it is for the player that has it and how disgusting it feels to go against it. A passed pawn against a king is very strong, but 2 passed pawns against a king is soul-crushing because the king is basically glued to those pawns now. This is because the king cannot capture these pawns. If he tries to capture the supporting pawn, it leaves the square of the one in front, and black will be very sad here. I used to try to support these pawns with my king, not realizing this pattern is literally broken, but now I know. The main practical application of this is obviously in the endgame. In this position, even though the material is even, black is very happy because he knows the white king will soon be glued to the square of the c4 pawn. But he has to be careful because if he isn't, he will allow white to create the same construct on the king side, and well, this is a draw. The move I would play here is probably g5 because it prevents h4 very well and white no longer has a chance of creating this pawn structure, and then once g5 is played, the black king can very comfortably march up and capture these remaining pawns. Before we move on, please leave a like and comment what your favorite chess life hacks are. I might make more parts in the future since I find these simplifications very interesting. If your opponent does not have a knight or a bishop of the same color, and there are no pawns to disrupt this structure, the bishop will almost never be captured for free and can stay there for the rest of the game if it wants to. This is one of the easiest ways to create an outpost bishop. The computer might not always prefer these moves, but because I am neither Stockfish or Magnus, I really feel like these simplification ideas really help me eliminate a lot of the complexity in endgames, and this one has won me more games than I can count. This one really feels absolutely disgusting to go against, but the application for this rule is a bit niched in the sense that it only really helps you when you have an advantage, and the only way to lose is to blunder a bishop. In this position, I didn't have too much time on the clock left, and I decided that it was too risky to allow him to pin a bishop to my king or to skewer them, so I decided to create 2 of these patterns and just win the game very comfortably by basically allowing for 0 counterplay from my opponent, and then my king can safely walk up forward and capture these pawns. Do note that this set it and forget it approach is not to be played in every game. This is a life hack only in the sense that it will make the position simpler, not better. if your bishop is posted on a useless square, you just created a big pawn, and if your opponent can pin the pawn to your king, you can actually lose the bishop in the process. Like, here I have the chance to play the fabled dagger bishop, and it definitely makes the game simpler in the sense that I lose instantly. A queen check spamming you is very difficult to stop, but rooks check spamming you is borderline useless because they can at most only check you two ways. If you're in a file or a rank adjacent to the rook, they lose one of the checks unless that square is defended, of course. If you have a piece or a pawn, hiding behind said piece is a very effective way to stop getting checked indefinitely, but unlike the queen, you can stop the rook from checking you even with no pieces around the king. If the rook is close enough, simply move to one of its adjacent diagonal squares will not only stop the checks but also force the rook to move. A very practical use of this rule is when your opponent is trying to flag you by spam checking you. You can get out of that with very few calculations if you just move towards their rook and hug one of its diagonals. Another use for this, and this is a game I got very recently, is to cheese a win on unsuspecting opponents. We are entering the slightly unethical side of things, but I don't care. Elo is Elo. This position is dead drawn. I think most of you will agree. But when my opponent offered the draw, I declined because I saw that his king was on the side of the board, and if he is not careful, he will get mated. So I start by forcing the rook to move. This is what we've discussed, and now he chooses to move to the g6 square. Here I decided, okay, if I want counterplay, I have to threaten the checkmate somehow, so I move my rook down and hope that he somehow blunders mate in 1. To my surprise, he decides to check spam me. I think he was kind of annoyed that I declined his draw, and well, with very little calculation, I decide to move towards the rook and maybe cheese him in a way that he maybe did not expect, because if he plays this move, I can go king f5, forcing the rook to move and threatening checkmate in 1. And well, that's exactly what he played, because he was not calculating whether or not I had mate in 1, he was simply trying to flag me. Bishops cannot defend each other. This one is very niche and rarely matters, but I've missed these tactics way too often. Unlike knights, bishops cannot be configured in a way where if you take one, the other recaptures, which means if you attack both at the same time and neither is defended, you should win one of them. In king-rook versus king-bishop pair endgames, these ideas will be a lot more prominent. Black is winning in this position, but I will argue that it is very easy to mess up if you're not careful, and white can comfortably find the winning ideas if black blunders, which makes this one of the rare times I will not resign in a losing position. If they line up with each other, the king or an undefended pawn, that's material loss, which means black has to play the chess equivalent of Sudoku in order to win. Meanwhile, white just has to keep their rook and king on different colors, and they never get forked or skewered. Another idea that stems from bishops not being able to defend each other is that they also cannot attack the same piece. A common idea in the rook pair versus queen endgames is to use the rooks to double up and attack squares, since the queen cannot defend the same square twice. But in the bishop pair case, you can defend a pawn with your king and rook, and your opponent can never use their piece advantage that way. That's all I got for now. I plan on maybe making more of these and make them specific to certain aspects like chess hacks for endgames or chess hacks to flag your opponent. I'll judge based on how well this video is received. As always, thank you for watching.